All right. Thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate it. Really excited to see you guys made time out of your week to join us, because I think what we've done here is assemble a pretty unique panel. The panelists here have a pretty interesting take on the built environment, given that they focus on multi-site development. Maximizing the value of digital practice for multi-site is a lot different than sort of mega project or other types of building delivery. So I'm excited to hear from these guys and look forward to chatting with you all. We'll open it up at the end and have some open conversation, and I hope that sounds good. Quick intro for myself. I'm Kyle, Vice President of Operations at VIATechnik. VIATechnik is a global leader in digital transformation. So we help our clients create systems, software, and solutions related to what we're going to talk about today. And when you think about the value of digital transformation, the value that VIATechnik tries to bring to its clients, there may be no bigger scale than multi-site. We all think of airports, healthcare, stadiums, really exciting big projects, but there's over 1 million retail establishments in the United States alone. And retail isn't the only thing to think about in multi-site. Multi-site also includes warehousing, medical office, data centers. All these types of buildings are being delivered in repetitive multi-site building products. The thing is, multi-site owners have unique challenges. These companies must view digital transformation and technical opportunities through the lens of scalability, repeatability, and standardization. It's something we don't need to think about when we design a one-off stadium. As I mentioned before, our panel today has 3 experts on the topic. Megan Conrad, to my right here, Senior Director of Operational Excellence at Ryan Companies. Ryan Companies, for those of you that don't know, is a national builder, developer, designer, and real estate manager. They touch virtually all aspects of project delivery, including multi-site. Thanks for joining today, Megan. We also have Xavier Loayza, Design Technology Lead at Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A doesn't need much of an introduction, but they have close to 3,000 restaurants in the US, Canada, and Puerto Rico, and they employ more than 35,000 team members. So when you think about multi-site, you think about scale, Chick-fil-A is a very good example. And finally, we have Joel Shetterly, Head of Design at Compass Coffee. Compass Coffee brings that bespoke aspect to our panel. 14 cafes in the DC area, growing very rapidly, and starting to understand the value that BIM, digital transformation, can bring to their business. I encourage you to take a look at the handout for today's session. It's on the Autodesk app. There's complete bios for our panelists. There's a lot more to these guys than what I just mentioned, but I want to keep it short so we can get to the conversation. It's also got a summary of our topic, so you can download afterwards everything we talk about today, the summary. There's a QR code link to a digital twin white paper, some cool stuff on that handout, so please do check it out. With that, let's get started. Let's talk digital transformation for multi-site owners. Sound good?
Yeah.
Great. All right. So to provide some context for this session, I'm hoping that each of you guys can tell us a little bit about your building product. And when I say that, I'm kind of looking for, what do you most frequently work with? What are your companies building? And how are digital tools supporting each of you guys individually in your work? So Joel, we'll start with you on the right. Can you tell us a little bit about your process, workflow for standing up new sites? What does building products look like at Compass?
Sure, yeah. Thank you very much. So it's 16 cafes now.
Love it. They're so rapid, I can't even catch up.
No, so for us, BIM technologies were essential from day one when we realized that we wanted to grow and create a prototypical cafe that we could apply to a variety of types of spaces. So we lease our spaces, we build them out, we operate them for the duration of the lease, but all of our cafes are wildly different in terms of layout and the existing conditions that we have to fit into. So when we're starting, we start with a scan of the space, and from the scan, we build a model in Revit, and in Revit, we build the whole cafe, And that becomes eventually the digital twin that we use as a reference for all the decisions we made in the design, all the equipment we put into that cafe, and we iterate off of that model as we move forward from space to space. So that's like very zoomed out our workflow and how we use BIM.
And Joel, you're mostly talking about leasing spaces. You're not doing any ground-up freestanding restaurants yet or cafes yet?
That's correct.
Okay, cool. And you said 16 now in the
16,
all
correct.
in the DC
Yep.
area. Great. Megan, can you tell us a little bit about the building product that you work a lot on?
Yeah, so I bring a little bit of a different perspective to the panel here, being that we're an integrated real estate firm, and we've got an in-house architecture, we're builders, we're developers, and we manage properties. We don't necessarily own properties for long term. Uh-oh, did I lose it? Oh, here we go. But in this conversation, I want to talk about the multi-site properties primarily with industrial products. So we build a lot of industrial for food and bev or retail distribution for confidential clients. And so we see a lot of these kind of multi-site products come through where we're having to, sometimes we are designing for them and other times we are just straight builders for them, and oftentimes we're developers for them as well. We're not primarily managing those properties, but we touch them from a lot of different disciplines. So BIM, I don't know how to best explain it, is so huge for us, and part of sitting up here on the stage today is I'm really excited about having this conversation about digitizing for multi-site owners, because it's been a long journey to kind of get folks up to speed to really get on the BIM train. It's very important for us as a company, for Ryan companies, because it's just integrated into our workflow now. So if we have clients who come to us for multi-site projects, we're immediately thinking, okay, we need to translate this to BIM if they aren't already in it. So it's just part of our workflow now.
So Megan, focusing on industrial, I guess for a second, how have you seen delivery evolve over the years, specifically for multi-site industrial?
Yeah, so kind of a little bit repeating on what I was alluding to there is it's taken a while for our owners to get on board with BIM, especially in the industrial space where the buildings are maybe a little less complex. And so they're thinking, okay, why do I need this? I'm just building a warehouse and then moving on. So in about, I would say maybe 2017 or 2018, we started to see this really ramp up. And the common consensus was, all right, BIM isn't going anywhere. We should really figure this out. We should really figure out how we're going to do this. And so we actually, kind of a little bit of a story, we had a client call us in 2018 and said, where do we start? Be our partner in this and help us develop, what does BIM look like for me as an owner? How do I help advance this for my company and my standards? Because Ryan companies had been doing it for quite a while. And so we could be a partner to them and really help them develop their own standards. So it's been a journey. I would say not every multi-site owner is on board with it yet, but again, when we get those instances where they are not in BIM or they're not yet convinced, we will take their 2D drawings and we will usually work with a third-party company to translate those into BIM, primarily because the benefit is so huge for us to work in the model and solve those problems, for our own purposes. And then ultimately the goal is to have that client realize the value of BIM on their end and be able to own it and use it on their end after the product building is constructed.
Perfect, got it. Javier, flipping it over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about Chick-fil-A's building products?
Yeah, so Chick-fil-A has a diverse portfolio at this point, and so we're constrained by different site conditions, right? So we have one side, we could be inside a mall, we could be inside an airport, it could be a standalone restaurant. So depending on the level of productization of the restaurant, we will also maintain templates that work with that. So I would say the biggest one is the standalone one, where we maintain a number of prototype-like templates that allow us to keep growing our restaurants. yeah, and further along at the project-specific level, get boosted by more design and being able to comply to local code and things like that, or local environment conditions in general.
Got it. So you're talking about adapting templates or prototypes on a site-by-site basis. What are some of the challenges you guys are facing with kind of delivering this methodology at scale, right? I mentioned 3,000 restaurants expanding to Canada, Puerto Rico. What are some of the challenges you guys are facing right now?
It's about the same. It's trying to not over-constrain design outputs, but at the same time providing the flexibility for operators to succeed. When I say over-constrained, it's could be related to standardizing. So from the realm of the whole realm of design options that we may have, kind of like discretize and pick a few ones that work for most of the cases, for most of the site conditions out there. And when I say flexibility, being able, or operators and team members to succeed and being able to show care to our customers.
Perfect. So all three of you had in your first response about what buildings you work with most frequently with, you had BIM, right? And BIM has clearly played a central role in digital transformation at each of your organizations. I'm hoping, can each of you share some stories of growth or lessons learned in adopting or implementing BIM over the years? And maybe put yourself in the seat of a multi-site owner that is 1 year in or just starting their journey. What roadblocks would you anticipate for them? Megan, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, so I guess rewinding a little bit to, we'll say that 2017, 2018 mark. What's interesting is the challenge that our clients were having was that they didn't necessarily have like a BIM department or staff, people at their companies to really start strategizing and thinking about this. But they knew they knew it was the direction they needed to move in. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is, if you're an owner, do you have the right people on your team to really start strategizing where you want to go and what you want to do with the information? And so in one of the earlier conversations with our client, they weren't there yet. They actually did not have BIM people on their end. And so when they called us, they said, we have this idea of where we want to go, but we don't even know if it's right. Can you help us understand, this is our 5-year vision of what we would like. What do we need? What do we need to be thinking about? What kind of information should we be tracking? What do we need to be demanding from our designers as far as BIM goes? We don't even know. And so we were able to kind of help guide them in that scenario. And I would say any owner in the room, if you're in that position where you don't have, you're kind of starting at that very beginning, leverage your builder partnerships to help guide you in that direction and really try and understand what's feasible especially from a builder or a designer perspective of what makes the most sense for your long-term vision, and where you can start asking for those things right now for getting people used to building in 3D, delivering in 3D, what kind of information you want to track in 3D. So it's a long process, especially if you're starting from scratch. But it is, I think we're all in the room here agreeing that BIM is here to stay, and there's a ton of value in it. So it's really about, asking the question to yourself, in 5 years, what do I want to be able to do with this model? How do I want to be able to leverage it? And then kind of work backwards from there as to, okay, it might take a few years to get there, but what do we need to start with and prioritize today?
Cool. Javier, can you tell us a little bit about kind of how you've seen BIM evolve at Chick-fil-A over the years?
Yeah, so we are working with BIM authoring tools, I would say 5+ years until now. On the growth side of things, I would say it takes a little bit of time for adoption, training, setting things up correctly, and being very clear with the goals that we want to achieve when we switch, when we flip the switch. So we are not 100% BIM at this point, and we will scrape and rebuild restaurants, and we'll still rely on rasterized documents that have some information about some content about those stores. So don't feel like you're in a rush to just flip the switch and change it all. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it doesn't have to be a one-day turnaround, flip the switch sort of a thing. Joel, I think Megan mentioned if you're starting from scratch. And I think maybe you, of all three panelists, most recently were perhaps in that position. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to start from scratch and have this green space ahead of you?
Right. So Compass is a sort of strange coffee company in that we like to do a lot of things ourselves that most coffee companies don't typically do. So we roast the coffee and we make the flavors, but we also do our own construction and do our own drawings and drafting. And it was in, real quick also, show of hands, just sort of rough, owners, who in the room is like an owner or an owner rep? And of you guys, how many of you are in BIM right now and working in BIM? Who's not working in BIM? So everyone, varying degrees of BIM adoption throughout. Cool. Because, I mean, for us, it was in like we opened our first cafe in 2014, and we're kind of figuring out the operations there. And in 2015, 2016, we were figuring that we wanted to open a lot more. We were like, all right, cool, how do we do this? And I think we worked with a local design firm in DC to open our first cafe, and we were digging through the CAD files and trying to add a faucet or something. And we're like, this same faucet is in like 20 files. Like, this is crazy to go and update all of the sheets to get a coordinated set with the change. And we're like, this can't possibly be real. Like, this can't be how people do this. And we had no idea how wrong we were, and that was in 2014, 2015, the absolute standard. But we learned about BIM when we were exploring in that very early period, just like, okay, cool, if we're going to grow in a scalable way, how do we do it? And we were like, we have to become BIM native, essentially. And we made the decision very early before our second cafe that we were going to model every piece of equipment with MEP-rich data in BIM. We're going to work off of a really robust template for all of our cafe locations. And so we really grew up in that environment, and I think it's like a really cool contrast to be on this panel with you both having obviously worked in this industry for a lot longer than BIM has been standard, and for so that's sort of how we came to BIM.
Yeah, there's almost like a benefit to you guys from having the ability to start from scratch. In this digital age, right? The conversion horror stories that we've all kind of been through don't have to apply to Compass Coffee.
Well, or to anyone, I think. I mean, it's really like the question of, because we also worked with architecture firms in DC and GCs who were not on board with BIM and who were like, no. Like, that's crazy and we won't, like, we don't want to go down that path. And so it was finding partners who could work in the system that we were building,
Sure.
who were invested in building that with us to make something that was really robust and repeatable and scalable that has made this succeed in the long run. And there were definitely, you have to find people who are on board with.
Do you feel like
your
you
vision.
pay a premium sometimes to find the right partner?
I think BIM is so essential to what we do just as a small company. Like, I'm like one of two people working on design in-house at Compass and construction. And so we use BIM to scale. I mean, it's the only way that it's possible for us to do anything at scale. Like, and it allows us to avoid all the expensive errors in construction. We start with the model and recap, like 3D scan of the space. We build the model. We know that we have an accurate record of the existing conditions. I mean, our unit economics are very tight. So if we get hit with like a $5,000 change order during a build out, that's like significant for us. And it seems silly, but that's like the reality of like a small owner operator doing construction. So it's really important for us to avoid those kinds of errors during construction, and it's really only because we have this really robust BIM workflow that we're able to do that and actually build cafes that can become contributing profitable locations
Right.
in a reasonable period of time.
Javier, I have a similar like follow-up for you. You know, I know you guys rely on vendor partners, architectural partners throughout the country to do site adapt work. Do you feel like you're paying a premium to find the right architect who's willing to jump in and deal with your digital prototypes and make them work? And how's that process been finding the right partners for Chick-fil-A?
So Chick-fil-A likes, for the most part, having like these long-term relationships. So we kind of like take the time on, you know, training them and making sure like we are all aligned. And I don't really pay the bills, so I really don't know how
Sure.
much of premium we're paying.
But you're willing to put in the effort
Yes.
to get them to where
we
you
do
feel like
invest
they should be.
heavily in the front end to, you know, maintain the content that we provide so they can use it down the road.
As a follow-up on that, certainly the investment on building a robust BIM system is, I mean, for us, it was huge, and we only have like 400 pieces of equipment and, you know, 30 wall types. But just creating the information ecosystem that you could drop someone in, because now as we grow, obviously the project is to bring in other partners to work in our templates and to start laying out our cafes for us and working with architecture firms in different regions around the country as we grow. So the investment in building the robust system, that's where we really felt it.
Yep, makes sense. Build it first and then rely on partners to engage within that system.
I do have one, I want to say, challenge that to add to that from a builder perspective, because we have a lot of different clients, and as they become more, you know, BIM sophisticated, and they come to us with a very long and robust BIM standard of their own that is super bespoke to them, it becomes very challenging for us to start managing all of those different, you know, naming conventions and file posting and software, and it's a lot. And so I think like as an industry, as we move forward, it's just going to be something that we should be thinking about, you know, how we can, I don't want to say make it easier on the builder side, but to figure out the right balance of, from an owner perspective, what is it that you can own or automate or maintain on your side, and where does it make sense to have the builder do it themselves or the subcontractor trade partner, just because it can be very overwhelming. It hasn't gotten to that point yet, but I can kind of see it written on the wall as everybody becomes more sophisticated with BIM, that it can be a tidal wave of dealing with all of the different standards and uniqueness for each client.
Yeah, understood. One of you guys mentioned earlier, looking out 5 years and determining as an owner, you know, what do you want to do with this data? That to me screams digital twins, right? Which is kind of a hot topic in our industry right now. And this term carries different meanings depending on who you're talking to at AU or in the industry. And it can actually be, we've experienced, it can actually be pretty confusing for an owner to begin their digital twin journey because of all these different paths that you can go down in implementing digital twins. VIATechnik actually made an effort to publish a white paper and a framework that tries to define what digital twin means, different levels of implementing digital twin, kind of like, you know, BIM Forum did back in the day with LOD. But having said that, I'd love to hear kind of what each of your definitions of digital twin is. What does digital twin mean to your business and the value that you can get out of digital twins? Javier, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, you know, my definition is a little bit stricter, I guess. So I would say what we do have is a robust front end, you know, template set of for design efforts, and also we have a robust reality capture initiative that we have a great partner that manages that and goes out and capture existing condition of our restaurants and yeah, that help you know throughout the design life cycle of the restaurant in general.
And in the reality capture program, you know, what are you trying to get out of it long term?
It will be great. So that's another point that we were talking about earlier. We are in need of a BIM server that allows us to manage object at an object level. We're okay at managing at the file level currently, but we do really need to work on the round trip of the information. So I think that's the biggest part I'm worried about right now.
Joel, how about you? Digital twins. What are you guys thinking 5 years, 2 years from now? Digital twins at Compass.
I mean, very exciting for us was in our most recent location using the BIM 360 model of our space to train cafe managers on drive-through operations. It's our first drive-through location. It's a big deal for us. Very exciting. And obviously, you know, we're figuring it out as we go, and you don't have a lot of time once the build-out is complete to actually get in before you need to start operating. You're paying rent. So we created a BIM 360, a model in BIM 360 that we allowed cafe managers to work in to understand bar flow and drive-through operations and solve all of the thorny sort of. So it's like, I know that, you know, 2 years ago in Digital Twins, it was everyone talking about like the nurse in the operating room or whatever, you know, and it's like, all right, so nothing so high stakes as that. But I think that from a very practical standpoint, 3D models are very accessible and intelligible. Whenever I walk onto any one of our job sites, it is 9 times out of 10 that the set is open to the sheet with all the 3D renderings. Like, I think that's what most people look at and like will reference other sheets as necessary, but it's so accessible, and realizing that we could make that information accessible not just to our builder partners and contractors, but to our team to train them on operations. And going forward, it's literally, as a design-driven company, we use models and our understanding of those spaces to make decisions going forward about equipment specifications, about can we take 2 feet off the bar to save, 20 square feet and a couple $1,000s in stainless steel. And without good records of equipment and layouts that were accessible by lots of our internal partners, we wouldn't have any way of coming back and closing the loop on that decision-making process.
You mentioned 2 use cases of digital twin that I actually think are fairly unique: training and value engineering. Like when you go out into the industry and talk to people about digital twins, those would be pretty low on the list. And I love to hear that, as a multi-site operator, that's where you're extracting value.
It's a big deal for us if we can save 5 square feet in the back of house and get rid of like a single wall of shelving. I mean, that scaled out as we develop our template that we want to apply to the next 10, 20, 30 cafes. The savings from that kind of decision can be very significant. And the failure to see an opportunity for that kind of smart value engineering can also be very expensive. So it's really through this like, all right, cool, our resources are limited, we have to get scrappy. Like, treating our models as digital twins for value engineering as we develop a template to apply to many locations is a way that we can get very scrappy and use information that we already have.
Megan, what are your thoughts? Where's your head at with digital twins?
Digital twins, my favorite. No, it's very interesting from Ryan Company's perspective, being that we don't really own our buildings. We don't necessarily say we want a digital twin so that we can maintain it. We're kind of looking to our owner to kind of drive that advancement of digital twins. So we actually have a client who, 5 years ago said, we're interested in eventually tracking this information in a digital twin format. And today we're starting that process with them with asset tagging. And it's not rolled out yet, but it's being introduced, and we're just like, finally, we get an owner who is driving that process, and it's through us. And we have not really experienced that before, so this is very exciting. For us, for Ryan Companies, we're kind of using it in a little bit of a different way. It's less about the building itself as being a digital twin and more about the ecosystem of the buildings. So in a lot of the multi-site products that we're developing, we will actually track that and develop like a data twin in a site library. So we're building our own application that kind of documents the building in a library, but it's not like you're going in and spinning a model around. It's more about the data behind that building and how we're kind of cataloging and librarying that and the lessons learned that go with that. So again, we don't really see from our chair specifically the benefit of pulling it up and getting in there and looking at the things quite yet. We know it'll get there. We're just not in that space yet, but we said step one is we want to take this baby step of cataloging our developments, where they are, putting some of the lessons learned into this catalog or this library, and then we can build it out from there and attach models to it.
I think it's important to recognize the user views, especially when you're talking about twins. Like what's the information that you want to mirror, right? What's valuable? What are those user views out there, and what's important for your audience?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I've got us on time here. We're looking good, but I think this is one of the most unique conversations that you might hear at AU. I want to talk about the intersection of customer service and digital transformation. Why customer service is a huge part of all three of your businesses. I attached some articles actually in the handout that go into Compass Coffee's and Chick-fil-A's theories on customer service. There's all sorts of cool articles out there about Chick-fil-A in particular and how they approach customer service. So I'd love to hear from you three about this critical business operation, how you guys make profit is customer service, and how digital transformation supports it. Javier, maybe we can start with you. How does it filter down, right? How does customer service filter down throughout your organization, down to real estate, design, construction, and your team?
Yeah, so it's about showing care. Showing care about the people that support restaurants. We work at the support center, and so we need to make sure that we're always supporting someone that's selling chicken. So and the same thing with our partners. Like I said, like we take relationships serious. We're at the organization. I'm fortunate enough to be at an organization that cares about building up those relationships and having conversation, and it's part of the culture. So same happens with partners. We have those conversations. We get them on board, and we have those tough or friendly conversations that sometimes we need to have. But showing always care.
So Joel, staying along those lines, I've heard you mention, I think it was actually in like an Autodesk publication that I read it. Everything must be as good as the coffee we serve.
Yes.
How are you embracing that as head of design?
Well, that's the overriding philosophy, that if we're not creating an experience that lives up to the promise of our core offering, which is coffee, a real good cup of coffee, that we are failing in a very fundamental way. So from the very beginning, we knew that the built environment that we were creating in our cafes was essential to delivering on that promise. Both in creating a space that's intuitive for our customers and comfortable, and I mean literally down to like when you walk in the front door, do you know where to go to place your order? Like, is it intuitive? Is there a clear line of sight to the person at the register who you can lock eyes with and go like, okay, cool, I feel welcome here. And after you pick up your cup of coffee, do you have to look around for like the milk and stuff, or like ask and you feel stupid because you're like, where's the milk? It seems like it should be very simple. Or can you create a space that guides you through that experience? And particularly in when we're doing very high volume, serving thousands of cups of coffee every day, that becomes really important because the burden on our team, if the space isn't intuitive for customers, is huge, and it takes time away and energy away from providing an amazing customer experience if you're telling every other person where to get the milk. And then on the other side of that is the creation of an ergonomic experience on bar for our baristas and our teams in the back of house, ensuring that, literally the direction when you pull a shot of espresso, you have to put it's called the portafilter, it goes in the espresso machine. The direction of bar flow is consistent with the direction of pulling the shot of espresso out of the machine so that you're not making a movement that's counter to the direction of a cup on the counter all day. And that actually has it has a health impact for our teams, right, in terms of repetitive motion, to make sure that you're designing an ergonomic space to work in. And it also impacts their ability to provide legendary customer service because they're not distracted by working in a space that's difficult to work in or unsafe or uncomfortable. So it's both sides for us. It's creating, through design, an intuitive and inviting cafe experience for the customer, and also an amazing place to work for our cafe teams.
Got it. Megan, so Ryan has a lot of different disciplines in-house. We mentioned them, right? Everything from development to in-house design to construction. How have those different disciplines used digital transformation to support how you guys deliver customer service?
Yeah, so I always say our clients are our priority because without them we don't really exist. And so it is top of mind for us and our teams every day. And we kind of recently, in the last few years, underwent a transformation of our own where we're kind of saying we've been doing customer service the same way for many, many years. We need to be better. We just need to do it better in service of our clients. And we are tackling it a little bit differently in each of our disciplines, but ultimately it's under one umbrella of customer, client satisfaction. So in development, for instance, we actually developed an application called Napkin Sketch that we wanted to be able to say, in service of our clients, our developer can go to a coffee shop and be able to drive early massing, site test fits very quickly in 5 minutes. We can have that conversation and we can have it quickly and effectively based on our own historical data that we've put into the application. And that has made a huge difference in how we serve our clients. When it comes to our architecture teams, we are now kind of doing studies on some of the even industrial buildings that they've designed to see kind of health and wellness aspects of it. So can we visualize that in a data form that we can drive conversations with our clients to say, here are some of the survey feedback that we're getting from your end users, and here's how you might be able to use that in your future designs. And then for our construction arm, we never wanted to digitize the process of client conversations or touch points or anything that's very protected for us. We want it to be as personal of an experience as it was 20 years ago, but with the technology to enhance it. So essentially what we've done is we've built a system where we can kind of take the feedback that we're getting from our clients in these conversations and touch points that we're having, and it goes into like client playbooks. And so we've got standards, we've got BIM standards, we've got interview feedback, what could we be doing better? And that is being fed into like a knowledge management platform that we can then, use as a library for future conversations, to inform new team members. So essentially, we're using the tools and technologies to really enhance the client experience. We always want to be doing it better, but really trying to tap into that without losing that personal, one-on-one touch points that we have with our clients.
Cool. Javier, that kind of reminded me of something I feel like I should follow up with you on. So you guys mentioned wayfinding, health and wellness, ergonomics. When you have a lesson learned related to something that's like so people-oriented or customer-oriented, how do you get it back into that prototype program? I mean, you can't just click a button and say, I heard a customer tell me this, now make my building better. So what does that change management process look like for Chick-fil-A?
Yeah, so we try to capture possible deviations or things that we find out there from the prototypical versions that we learn from our partners, and that feed into the change management process that we have internally, and that triggers conversation between different design teams that take care, as you said, like ergonomics or this, how the space works and how we want to make it work, and so that's the way it works for us. Change management, and then we put it back as a lesson learned.
Joel, are you heading down that path of kind of collecting lessons learned in any sort of digital way and then having a process to like actually benefit from the lesson?
Yes, absolutely. So in our BIM standards, we include things like, in the same way that you would have a queuing distance at a drive-through, we have a queuing distance in our cafes based on expected daily sales, and we know that in order to create a cafe experience that works and is warm and inviting, you need to have that length of the queue inside. And for us, it's literally watching the cafes. Like I spend every day in our cafes, and I see thousands of people drinking coffee every day, and literally learning. Okay, cool. People keep bumping their hip on the corner of this table. Like, we can never have a table at this height that is within 2 feet of our queue. Or, I noticed that no one sits with their back to the front door at the communal table in these 3 cafes because it's too close to the door, and you feel exposed when your back is facing the line of people. And then literally in our model, going back and saying, okay, cool, on our communal table model, in the model itself, you create a clearance that's like, do not place within 4 feet of queue. And so capturing those lessons learned in the actual BIM models that we then place and build out our spaces with.
Yeah, it's a very digital forward approach to capturing a lesson learned. Cool. One more topic here, and then we're going to turn it over to the audience. We'd love to hear your questions. The last topic, though, is I'd love to hear your outlook for the next 12 months. What are you thinking about to improve your business processes? What's on your mind? Anything you're investigating that might be a little future forward-looking for the next 12 months? Joel, start with you.
For us, we're sort of coming out of this 1 to 10 phase where like 0 to 1 is like, will almost kill you, and then 1 to 10 is really, really hard, and then you're in the sort of 10 to 50 phase, which things sort of get more and more ironed out. And so for us, it's taking all the lessons that we've learned through like pain and lots of sleepless nights and expensive mistakes in the first couple of years, going from 1 to 10, creating a really robust set of standards for those, and then rolling out those standards in different markets with different partners. So for us, it's like, all right, cool. I've spent personally like years developing our BIM standards, and now are they good enough where I can hand them off to a team of production people somewhere else in the world, and they'll actually turn around a cafe model that is too standard, and thinking about how we can take the system and actually apply it at scale.
Perfect. So. Javier, being at 3,000 plus, what are you thinking about for the next 12 months?
A lot of things. I would like to do it all, but it takes a whole team to make it happen. I'm hopeful for synergies happening within our company, cross-functional, where we can, design, IT, development, and construction, real estate can really talk about the information in BIM and put it together in one place so we can all share it. And also most important, so all that information lives where it makes sense for that information to live. So that's in general. I would say like we're gonna keep building on top of reality capture program. That's a very hot topic right now. We want to know what's out there, what we have. We want to know, being close to being able to support operators as fast as possible without having to travel to the location. So existing restaurants is a hot topic right now for us. On the fun technological stuff, I would say, being able to forecast a little bit better, since the get-go, when the real estate has a deal, being able to say, okay, what type of restaurant are we going to be able to fit here, and things like that. And I will, on top of that, like Carl mentioned, we already have a good number of restaurants. We can start learning at the scale from what we already have.
A good number, very modest, modest 3,000.
Yeah, some analytics coming.
Sure, right.
Yeah.
Megan, what are your thoughts? 12 months, what's some blue sky stuff you're thinking about?
Yeah, so I mentioned we are building this site library. We have our napkin sketch, and essentially what we're looking towards is building something that connects everything together. So we have a lot of different, what I would say, point solutions that we've created, and they're super effective, but now we're kind of looking like, all right, can we make this a little bit more pulled together, and maybe even something that our client can play in, for instance, or something that we could bring up during a conversation with the client and say, all right, look at this, all this information, let's play in it. Let's see what we can do. Let's see where you want to go, and have some analytics there. So we have a really robust innovation and insights team that works on that, and computational design is very important for us, has been making great headway with that. And then just, I think the other thing I would add is working more on documenting and digitizing decision-making early on in the process, how those decisions are made. It's kind of eluded us a little bit. It's been, a lot of the focus has been on design and construction, but from a development standpoint as well, and that early on, concept to GMP process of how these design and development decisions are being made, we want to gain insights out of that. And we have to kind of start with, how do we capture those decisions? So that's what we're really looking forward to.
Awesome. For me, this is a good transition point. So why don't we see what the audience has to say? Does that sound good? We've got some giveaways. My man Grady here is going to run whatever you guys pick. So whoever has a question, we have some awesome Compass coffee. Do you want to tell us about this blend?
Sure, yeah, it's our autumn blend. It's a delicious sort of dark medium roast with notes of spice. There's a Sumatra in there that is, it really is like the spicy, earthy notes of fall that you get typically from Southeast Asian coffees. So
Autumn blend commercial right there. And then we've got some VT swag, some VIATechnik shirts, and a VIATechnik bag with some goodies in it. So whatever you want, we'll run it over to you. Who's got a question? Front row.
Hey there, everybody. Thanks for taking the time. Ashish Mandari from Ashland Capital. I actually wanted to ask a more conceptual question. We've spoken to Autodesk in the past and Megatech, and both of whom kind of tout this united world where AEC BIM models live kind of under a single umbrella, whereas companies like Procore, they talk about like a construction-only approach. Specifically, they say it's pretty rare for an owner to go back to the architect and pay them to update the original BIM model based on what's happened in the field. Based on some of the points you're making, that seems incorrect, but I just thought I'd ask it a little more directly. Curious your views.
I was asked to repeat the question because we're recording today, so I'm going to do that real quick. Ashish, if I understand your question correctly, it involves a common data environment, an umbrella of tools versus taking a construction-first approach, and maybe hearing from the panelists what our thoughts are.
I mean, we would never pay an architect to go back and update a BIM model because it's just not practical for us. It's so expensive. So what that means is we've had to adopt all these technologies ourselves and get really good at using them. And so it is essential, and we absolutely work in all of our BIM models. I have our first locations model up, I reference those models for decisions frequently that we made in the past. And I mean, I think for us, it's like understanding that BIM isn't just a discipline of architecture and construction, but it's like owners can use this technology, and I am representative of this because I'm not a sophisticated guy. I just learned, this stuff is all learnable. You don't need to be like a PhD in AEC disciplines to go out and learn how to open up a Revit model and make a decision based on what's in the model. And so for me, it's like less going back and paying an architect to update, a model with a decision that you made, and more like realizing that we had to develop this capacity in-house. And I think that's something that I feel very strongly about, and I do want to share with all the other owners, where it's like, get someone in the room who can work in Revit and work in BIM, because it's so powerful when you're able to pull up your own models and make those decisions.
Megan, Javier, any thoughts to add on common data environments versus point solutions? And
feel free to disagree,
I kind of have a comment and a follow-up question as well, but would you think that it would be great that we worried a little bit less in the future having all the tools about documenting, following, all the architectural engineering conventions that we have, so we actually can work directly in the model.
Mm-hmm. Say again?
Like, if we have all the tools for, automating documentation,
Mm-hmm.
would you say that would be better for people to work directly in the model, not to worry about, how sheets are set up and things like that?
I mean, for me personally, that's like a dream. I think it's a far off dream, just because of how different all of our spaces are. But I think as we move towards more prototypical designs, that would be extreme. I mean, that would be amazing. I mean, less time on laying out sheets. It's like, well, if it communicates the information that it must communicate in order to build it accurately, it's like, well, it meets the spec.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I did want to add, I mean, I think it's, again, owner-driven for how we approach that life cycle in BIM, because ultimately it's who's going to be using it at the end of the day. So from a strictly builder perspective, they're like, we're saying we want the BIM because it makes our lives easier and more effective and a higher quality product when we build. And we can do it quickly. And there might be other products that serve it better in that moment. But I think that I think the life cycle approach to it is the future. I think it just is going to be. But we have to figure out how to get away from these siloed point solutions that are, all right, if I'm a builder, I'm only going to use Procore and whatever BIM offerings they have because that's just what I do and it gets the job done. That might be easiest for the builder. But for an owner to have the right information captured at the right time with the right stakeholders, you might have to say, this other product works better for me and I need to, have this information documented in this way because I know I want to use it in a way 5 years from now. If you are a client and you don't necessarily have that end goal in mind of how you want to use that information, it seems like a harder sell to kind of say, somebody's like, well, why are we doing all of this? Well, you kind of have to have an answer to that. Like, here's how we're going to use it, and here's the rationale behind it. So there's a little bit of painting that vision that has to happen up front that can help all stakeholders get on the same page with you when you say, this is how I really want it done.
Ashish, can I get you some swagger coffee?
Yeah, that'd be great. I love coffee. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks
Sweet.
so much.
We'll do rapid fire here.
Of course.
Gentleman in the back here.
My question is a little bit on a similar topic, the feedback loop and the metrics that are driving that. Like, I'm sure profitability is your customer service and the company at the table as a classic example. Are there other specific examples? And then also the model management, who's the one taking in that feedback and updating the whole is kind of what I'd love to hear that.
Perfect. I'll summarize the question real quick. It's about feedback loop. How do you establish a feedback loop, get it back into your program, a digital program? Who's collecting the feedback, and how does all that work? So rapid fire, one answer. Javier, it was pointed to by Joel.
That works. So, like I said before, I am after a great BIM server support object management level. So I think that's what we need in order to feed back into the model and being able to, kind of like more in a real time, being able to, move X, Y, Z or apply a change that happened out there into the model. So I think it's very difficult at the moment by the tools that, we have. So I think, yeah.
So capturing feedback at the object level, acknowledging it's difficult, but kind of forcing yourself to do it at the object level.
Right.
And you're describing managing like a server with all these object models, and you update the object model and it automatically pushes out to all of your cafe or restaurant models? Is that sort of the idea for server-based object management in BIM?
Yeah, I'm not talking about, just to be clear, I'm not talking about content management, right? I'm talking about at the digital representation of the store, yeah, at that level. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah.
Coffee, swag? Nice. Over here?
Easy question. Content creation. Internal, outsourced, or off the shelf?
All right, question was content creation, internal, off the shelf, or vendor outsourced?
I mean, we push our manufacturers to make models for us, and that's just working with them and often reaching out to them and explaining what BIM is and why we need them to make a 3D model, and then they end up like making it and giving it to everyone, and they love it. And then outsourcing what we can, like taking in 2D CADs and finding someone who can knock out a model for us. And worst case, we do it ourselves.
So at 400 pieces of content, I think you mentioned earlier, you're kind of a mixed bag, but heavily pushing manufacturers. Javier, I know your library is much larger. You want to answer real quick?
Yeah, so we use vendors, we leverage vendors, and yeah.
Vendors.
Short answer is vendors.
Cool. Coffee, swag? All right. Gentleman here on the end.
Charlie Carmel, County, Oregon. I'm wondering, have any of you leveraged the COBE process to help facilitate data flow from construction into the facilities operation mode of building?
Yeah, great questions about COBE. Are we leveraging it? Are we using it for FM data operations? I'm thinking Megan here, but with any.
I have a short answer, and that is I don't know very well. I know we've done it a couple of times, but I'm not the expert on it. We have somebody internally who handles it, and so I can't give a straight answer, but I know we've done it.
Javier or Joel, any thoughts on COBE and how it relates to your business?
Not that I'm aware of. Again, like I'm part of the initial phase of the restaurant life cycle, so more on the design side of things, but yeah, looking forward to some of that.
What does COBE stand for?
It's an international standard for data management and data exchange within models. It's interesting that these three aren't being multi-site owners or dealing with multi-site development are not super into COBE. I think that's a trend worth noting. COBE as a platform or a framework is a little overwhelming. And when you're talking about multi-site, building 1,000 of something or 3,000 of something, it might not be the best solution for you. If you're talking about building one gigantic hospital, it could make a lot of sense to adopt. Yeah. But for these three, it sounds like it's not a huge focus area.
It is a lot of work.
Coffee, swag? All right, man. Coffee's going fast.
By the way, we can all go to the closest Chick-fil-A.
Sign out here. Take a group of 150 over to Chick-fil-A.
I think that would have been, the chicken would have gone first.
We probably have time for one more. Sorry, I think I saw you. Yeah.
Question for Joel. Since you don't have a cookie-cutter approach, how do you have the programming standards for spaces?
Yep. Question was, because you don't have a cookie-cutter prototype yet, how do you house the standards of your building product? Is it native in Revit or somewhere else?
Yes. So everything is native in Revit. In the same way that we have a library of our equipment that we use in all of our models, we actually have a library of all of our cafes. So when we're laying out a new space, it will be, okay, cool, it's roughly 2,300 square feet. It's this shape more or less. We can take this space from a past project, apply it to this new space by extending it in one dimension and shortening it in another, and then fine-tuning it from there. So we basically maintain a library of all of our spaces and apply the best fit to the space in question.
Do you have like a spec book or a prototype book that lives outside of that, or do
No.
you really push it all into the model?
Everything is in the model. In fact, we destroy the specs everywhere else that we find them. The only Revit for us is the only source of truth for equipment specifications, for construction standards. There is nowhere else that our grinder is modeled or has a spec book.
Okay. So the actual spec for the grinder and all of that is inside of the Revit model on a Revit sheet.
And if we change a new model, if we change the grinder to a new spec, we update the model in Revit. We mark the old one as obsolete, but there's no like PDF floating around in a Google Drive because
So when
it
you
just
hire
changed too
a
quickly.
GC, you do not give them a spec book as part of their contract docs.
That's correct.
Okay.
We provide the specifications in schedules
Inside
in
of
Revit.
the, yep. Coffee, swag? All right, somebody's got to take some shirts. We will hang around and we will give swag and coffee for anybody who wants to ask us questions after the session. I think we've reached our time though. So feel free to come on up and we'll hang out.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.